so David should be, listening. All right.
No birthdays today. Jesus, Lloyd, how are we going to manage?
I know. Yeah.
Yeah, problems logging in or something?
From my phone?
Oh, I was confused.
Okay. I think we have all of our pieces assembled.
Yes, sir.
So it's 4 o'clock, and I will call this April 17th meeting of City Council to order. And note we have actually seats that you can see here.
Oh, yeah.
And we have, for the first time in about 3 years, our clerk is up with us. And under ordinary circumstances, I guess we would have Mr. Rogers there, but he's a little under the weather today, so Sam's still hanging out on the side over there, and Ashley too. Okay. First of all, Ms. Thomas, would you call the roll, please?
Councilor Payne,
Here?
Councilor Pinkston,
Here.
Councilor Puryear,
Here.
Mayor Snook,
Here.
Vice Mayor Wade.
Here?
All right, so we're all here and present and accounted for. Is there a motion to approve or to amend the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second?
Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Our agenda is approved. This meeting will be divided into 3 sections. The first is a work session to hear and discuss presentation that does not require a council vote, and no council vote will be taken. And this will be Dr. Gurley and the school folks will be talking to us about KTAC. There will then be a closed meeting at roughly 5:30, or whenever the first part of the meeting is done. Closed meeting to discuss certain things, attorney-client privilege matters, whatever all else. Then we will come back usually around 6:30 for the City Council business meeting in council chambers right here. We will also, we're still doing it by Zoom as well, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so if you want to be zooming in, you can. Our note here says 23 pre-registered attendees, but I don't think that's applying anymore, is it?
Later tonight, yes.
It is still applying?
This is the last meeting, yes.
Right.
Okay, we're still applying that rule then. 23 pre-registered attendees plus media. So, the first item on the agenda, Dr. Gurley, you want to talk to us about the KTAC proposal?
Nope.
Not to me. Which one's your good side?
Yeah.
All of them.
All right.
There you go.
Ooh,
Take my glasses
the
off.
floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Snook, Vice Mayor Wade, members of council and staff assembled. This evening, I will stand before you and provide you an update with regards to Charlottesville City Schools staff progress towards a seamless and smooth transition of KTAC. Included in this presentation, I will review the timeline of events in the acquisition process, discuss why Charlottesville City Schools made the proposal to buy K-Tech. I will outline what has been done to prepare for a July 1, 2024 smooth transition. I will highlight what has been done to accomplish what has been accomplished in our processes. I will highlight the plans for slots, funding, and tuition. And lastly, I will provide our vision for the future of K-Tech, working alongside our city partners. Next slide. So K-Tech was founded in 1973 as a partnership between Charlottesville City Schools and Albemarle Public Schools during a time when there was only one high school in Albemarle and one high school in Charlottesville. There are currently 400 students being served at K-Tech in addition to adult education programming, and there are 10 programs, most of which require a 2-year commitment by students. Next slide. Pictured here is a snapshot of the timeline and where we are in our process. I have been in regular contact with Dr. Haas, Superintendent of Schools for Albemarle, to ensure our teams are working collaboratively. I have a standing meeting with him to provide him updates. However, we have established subcommittees which meet frequently. The star illustrates where we are, and February was when we captured this last, but of course, you know, now we are in the month of April, and we've had several meetings this month. Next slide. Why acquire K-Tech? As a point of clarification, we have been asked why we are planning to acquire K-Tech. We have highlighted here a few salient points for you. First, we recognize that K-Tech is an incredibly valuable community resource that diversifies learning opportunities for students and adults. While a June 2022 offer from ACPS offered Charlottesville High School students the possibility to continue to attending K-Tech for a time, the letter did not address how operations would be maintained to ensure Charlottesville City Schools students could attend. The final offer from ACPS in December of 2022 again did not address how Charlottesville High School students would continue to access K-Tech. We believe, most importantly, that since 75% of K-Tech students are from Albemarle, ACPS was not incentivized to meet the needs of Charlottesville High School students. On the other hand, CCS is incentivized to operate the facility in a manner that continues to meet the needs of both Charlottesville students and Albemarle students. Even if Albemarle one day does not use many of the slots at K-Tech, the center is still a valuable component of our area's youth and workforce development strategy. Lastly, the price point is a sub-bullet listed here because truly it was secondary and a smaller consideration in comparison to the near-term and long-term access to K-Tech programming for our students. Next slide. This picture represents the action to dissolve the 1969 partnership, which creates a change. We will work to manage the impact of this change to be a small ripple rather than a wave. Next slide. To begin the immediate work of addressing transition, we have formulated the following subcommittees: Finance, Human Resources / Personnel, Instruction and Partnerships, Infrastructure, Technology, and General. The general subgroup consists of myself and Dr. Haas. That's on another slide, but it also includes his strategy person. Included in that is Ms. Powell as well. Next slide. So those transition teams listed are the school personnel from Charlottesville, Albemarle, and K-Tech who have been directly involved in the transition process. As I stated in the previous slide, we have had several meetings with these subcommittees in preparation for the transition. I think I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge at this moment that we did receive, Stephanie Carter is a part of our transition teams, and we did receive a resignation from her on Friday as she is preparing to take a job as the executive director of the Madison House. Included on our next slide are accomplishments that we have made thus far. 14 months from now will be July of 2024. Therefore, we find it prudent to our work to engage in the transition process, which we commenced immediately after the announcement of the acquisition of the K-Tech property. Here are just a few of the milestones and accomplishments we have made to date. We have planned and formulated transition teams. We have created a working document. We have created a planning document. We have established regular meetings. We have communicated with the K-Tech staff and our community, which is ongoing. We have analyzed the current K-Tech budget. We have assessed our K-Tech infrastructure, IT infrastructure. We have applied for funding for the wide area network, the WAN project, and we have made decisions as it relates to the name K-Tech, leaving it K-Tech and changing the A to area. Next slide. In order to make this process as seamless and smooth for the current and future K-Tech employees, we have begun the following. We are onboarding new staff through Charlottesville City Schools. We are transitioning those employees to our pay tables. We are moving K-Tech staff to Charlottesville City Schools email. We are conducting initial employment screening with existing staff. We are transitioning K-Tech staff to Charlottesville City Schools Talent Ed, which houses our employee relations information, such as our appraisals and etc. And starting this process now, we get to work through the kinks for new employees so that there are no unintended or adverse experiences for the current employees during the migration process. Again, we understand how important it is for the K-Tech staff to experience a smooth transition. Next slide. There are currently 400 students across 10 programs at K-Tech. Charlottesville and Albemarle have a combination of 4 participating high schools, which are CHS, Albemarle High, Monticello High, and Weston Albemarle High. 25% of the total slots are allocated for each high school. The remaining seats are open to homeschool families and out-of-district students. Next slide. So let's take a look at the current cost allocation structure. K-Tech's current 2023-2024 budget is approximately $3.8 million, including adult programs. The current funding formula was devised by founding K-Tech board members in 1969. At that time, there was only one high school in each locality. In the table pictured, the funding formula uses 4-year averages And what you will see is that half is based on each school division's enrollment, the current membership, in grades 9 through 12. The other half is based on each division's K-Tech enrollment. Currently, ACPS and CCS split half of the capital cost 50-50. The local funding request reflects the total operating cost for the high school programs to be allocated between ACPS and CCS, less revenues from state fundings such as grants. CCS uses fund balances for non-reoccurring expenses such as for equipment and other capital expenses. Next slide. So moving forward, as we move forward, our proposal is that the slots be offered to Albemarle County Public Schools under a rolling agreement for periods not less than 3 years. As I stated earlier in the presentation, many programs at K-Tech are 2 years. If a student finishes year 1 at K-Tech and remains in good standing, the student is guaranteed a slot for year 2 in each school division's allocation of slots. Having a multi-year agreement will ensure no sudden changes that could cause undue fiscal or operational stress to all stakeholders. Most importantly, the rolling slot agreement guarantees that all students get to complete their sequence in the event a school division chooses to go a different direction in CTE programming. The initial percentage of slots to Albemarle will approximate their current slot allocation. Next slide. Here's an example of what we mean when we say rolling slot allocations. As seen in the chart displayed, in October, each school division will make reservations for slot allocations for the 24, 25, and 26 school years. By October of 2024, the school divisions will need to decide whether they are committing to slots for 2027. That's the 3-year period. Subsequently, divisions will need to decide on slot commitments for 2028 by October of 2025. Our teams have decided that the October commitment allows appropriate budgetary planning for each school division. Next slide. Moving forward, I have shared with you the current slot reservation process as we proceed. Now I will share the tuition structure for K-Tech. Our tuition calculation takes into consideration the following. The total operating budget excludes all capital expenses, less overhead costs such as utilities, maintenance, and non-instructional personnel. We will also remove those specialty programs. There's a EMS program that's specific to Western Albemarle. We will remove that cost, and that will be charged directly to the school division. Therefore, the operating budget less the expenses previously mentioned, and those are those utilities, maintenance, and instructional and capital expenses. So the operating budget less those expenses will be divided by the total number of slots. The tuition rate will be set on a biennial basis corresponding with the state biennial budget process, with the consumer price index applied to year 1 tuition to determine the rate for year 2. The same slot tuition rate will be charged to any division reserving slots outside of Charlottesville City Schools. For Albemarle County Public Schools, this calculation will result in a lower cost per slot than they would have incurred under our current continuation of the partnership due to the capital and overhead costs now solely being funded by Charlottesville City. And just want to note that the slot reservation in advance of a school year may be different than if someone wants to sell their slots in a current year. Next slide. As I have shared earlier in the presentation, and as you just have seen by the previous slide, the finance team has been hard at work planning. Displayed is a summary of a budget projection. So this is a projected budget of what it could look like for fiscal year 25. As you see, the total funding needed is $3.4 million to operate K-Tech. The total funding number reflects some operational restructuring that is recommended in conjunction with ending the joint operation. The instructional direct and indirect costs are ultimately determined by program participation. The total funding number represents the instructional cost and overhead costs such as utilities, maintenance, and custodial services. So, if we are assuming that Albemarle will maintain 300 of the 400 slots available for fiscal year 25, then the primary operating budget impact on the local funding needed from the city can currently be projected to increase $720,000. We want to share this as a snapshot based on the best information we have available at this time. However, we do know that there have been questions that have been floating around regarding how much will it cost to operate K-Tech, specifically if Albemarle is not a part of K-Tech. Next slide. So, as we plan for the future of K-Tech, one of the most important questions is, what is the vision for K-Tech as we move forward? For the near term, we are focusing on a smooth transition for K-Tech employees and students. We are prioritizing the needs of CCS and ACPS students as we want them to experience no disruptions during this time. We have found the current programming to be a valuable asset for our students, our communities, and our workforce. I am certain that you have heard, and hopefully you felt through our communications and this presentation, that we value the programs at K-Tech. For the long term, we want K-Tech to continue to be a valuable resource and asset to Charlottesville and the greater community. We want K-Tech to continue to be a pipeline for our students and the adults for the skilled trades workforce. To ensure the long-term excellence of K-Tech, we have already begun the planning and organization of stakeholders to lend their voices to this process. The community's commitment to K-Tech has contributed largely to its success. For this reason, CCS has solicited the support and partnerships of other entities which also have a stake in seeing the programs succeed. Next slide. We will continue to work transparently and provide communication along the way. We recognize what is paramount to all of our success is a rolling commitment of slots to allow school divisions the flexibility to serve students and community in a manner in which they deem most appropriate. Lastly, as we move forward, we must continue to give consideration to the workforce needs of our community and greater communities. Our long-term vision for K-Tech is inclusive of workforce development, and where that intersects with the city's needs. We have had meetings with PVCC with regards to how we can enhance the already flourishing adult education programs that are serving people of Charlottesville and the greater region. Charlottesville City Schools has not been idle in this process. As you can see, we have not only done a tremendous work. As you can see, we have not only done a tremendous amount of planning, we have also taken steps to operationalize and implement those plans. This concludes my formal presentation, but most certainly I will take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Gurley. Councilors have questions?
I do.
Fire away.
Good afternoon, Dr. Gurley.
Good afternoon. My glasses on so I can see you.
Oh, okay. Well, I took mine off so I could see you. Mine are just for reading. Thank you for this presentation, and most particularly, thank you to you and all of the people on your teams and in the division that have helped you get to where you are today with this presentation. I specifically am pleased that you delineated in your timeline the sequence of events. As we all know, there have been a lot of things swirling around about K-Tech. And K-Tech is a valued resource in this community. And I believe you and your team and all of the people that are working appreciate its value. And so now people can understand how and when this process began and where we are. You answered my first question because your renaming of the A to area indicates why in your presentation several times you used the word area. You did give an example of outlying municipalities that if persons wanted to take slots, purchase slots, et cetera, and you specifically mentioned Louisa and Fluvanna, but that does not negate, that was an example, that doesn't negate anyone from the region, such as we have the region for prep, to participate in any of our programs. Is that correct?
That's correct. We currently are, at K-Tech, we currently are serving students from Louisa and Fluvanna.
Okay. My next question and final question is, as a former member of the K-Tech board, often we discussed increasing offerings, or if certain things were under-enrolled or under-prescribed, whichever term you needed. When you are having your discussions now with your working groups, are you looking at expansion as it relates to workforce development or enhancement, or are you feeling that we will leave things pretty much status quo to give us an opportunity to get a pulse on what's happening in the business communities and what our stakeholders and what our students are asking for?
That's correct. So throughout our planning process, what we have done is, and each year, the current administrator, which is Ms. Carter, she evaluates the enrollment and the requests from our schools to determine whether a program is going to continue in its current state. I will tell you that as we continue to build the future, we most certainly will evaluate what are the current industry needs. For example, we know that cybersecurity is something that's been growing. Those are the types of things. I know that at our own comprehensive high school, we've added a course on drones and things of that nature. So as the needs of the workforce changes, then most certainly we can add programs. But at where we are right now, we have no desire to remove any of the current programs because those programs have been serving our communities well.
All right. And thank you for providing us with a projection.
Thank you.
Dr. Gurley, thank you for your time and for the work that you've done with this and with other, just your day job. Thank you for that. I have a number of questions. Some of them may come across as critical. I don't mean that. It's questions I have about the situation and how we got to where we are.
Sure.
And how we can think about the future. So, and help me here if I'm missing something. So,
Sure.
it could very well be the case that the county decides, I understand they've got money to go build their own building that would replicate what they would do in K-Tech. So we have, I guess, less than 60 students from our system that are in the K-Tech process or actually use those services on a regular.
So currently, we have 60 students there currently.
Right.
But for the 2023-2024 school year, we have currently over 100 requests to attend K-Tech.
Okay.
What happens is the programs are based on slot availability. So the slots have been provided equally to schools. So right now, we have over 100 students that have requested to attend K-Tech for next year. And because it's in its current state, though all 100 will not be able to attend.
Is that because there's like a conflict in terms of scheduling with the county?
Well, if all of them want this, well, say if all of them, say if a large number of them want the similar program, and students from the other schools have similar interests, then it's on a first come first serve.
So we would
analogy.
actually the demand, so to speak, for K-Tech services for our students is actually higher than the 60 or so would indicate. It's more
For
like
the
100.
upcoming school year,
Yeah,
that is
okay.
absolutely correct.
That's encouraging. So, if I were a person in the community looking at this from a purely financial perspective, assuming the county decides to do its own thing, we could be sort of on the hook essentially for an ongoing operational cost of somewhere north of $3 million, I guess, some of which we would be paying anyway, but some of which I guess you're hoping. Are you hoping to essentially build like an adult educational services along the line of what they have there now to just keep that going? In other words, that extra expense is the idea basically that the city's going to pick that up?
Well, I mean, based on what we've put in front of you, that's how much it costs to operate K-Tech.
Okay.
And so we are implementing something initially that is mutually beneficial for both parties.
Okay.
So that's how we are leading into this. But most certainly, if down the road Albemarle wants to do something different, then we have to decide how can K-Tech best serve us and our greater region.
Okay. Okay. And then in terms of the adult educational piece, do you have any concern that the school's having to focus on that in addition to your main thing you're focusing on, which is for students? Do you have any concern about, and this may be a couple years down the road, but that's a different kind of work, I think, the CTE space.
Well,
Would it
someone's
sort of
already
be bolted on to what you're doing, or are you going to kind of set it aside and let it be managed on its own?
Well, in every school division, there's typically a liaison that serves as the adult education representative.
Okay.
I supervised that person in my last school division.
Okay.
She was the director of career and technical education.
Okay.
And she was responsible for adult ed programming. But we already have a talented staff member at K-Tech who's perfectly capable of doing the work. So we have a thriving adult ed program, but we also have the opportunity to partner with the community colleges, other industries. Again, we're making this purchase together, and I think that what we've heard from members of council and from the community is about formulating a task force. I don't want to ever stand before you and tell you what your needs are. I think you all know your needs better than I do. And so I look forward to hearing you all just articulate what the needs are, and then we understand where those things intersect, because we know that what happens inside of the school changes what happens in the community.
Yeah.
So we all win.
Yeah, I guess, for me, I appreciate you bringing up the question of needs. I mean, one need, obviously, is for us to keep the school system whole, particularly with the new renovation that we're doing, and financially. And then the other need is, as you've described, the CTE functions, and part of my question is, what do we think will be different now going forward in terms of managing CTE, which our whole community needs in a partnership, particularly with PVCC, versus what happened in the past? In other words, it seems pretty clear that the prior arrangement, there was some unhappiness there or whatever, but what's our sort of expectation that going forward things are going to be different or better for?
Well, I think I'm hearing I want to make sure that so what I'm hearing in your question is, so what got us here? Because Albemarle made an initial offer, and they made an offer to our school board, and during that initial offer, our school board replied that they did not want to dissolve the K-Tech, the current K-Tech agreement. They wanted to keep it the same and move forward and serve both students of Charlottesville and Albemarle. Right. That was that initial piece back in June of 2022. Right. So had Albemarle just said Charlottesville does not want to dissolve it and they want to keep things the same, I wouldn't be standing here. It was not clear in June of 2022 how Charlottesville students would be served, but it was clear that they wanted it. We didn't hear from them again until later on in the year. And the second time that we heard from Albemarle, what we heard was that they wanted to make an offer. Here's the number, and that Charlottesville City students could come there, but there's no guarantee. And so, not speaking on behalf of the school board, but I think what the school board saw is that this is something that we can pursue. One, because the number was just absolutely so low, based on what the value, just the value of the property alone, not all of the other assets. But what we get to do in this, as I've stated in the presentation, is we can incentivize this so that Albemarle can stay in this. Now, Grant, I don't know if they're already building a center or if they're planning to build a center, but if they're going to do it in the next 3 years, then I'm assuming that they've already started on that prior to wanting to acquire this building. But what we've done is we've said that we can incentivize this situation so that they can stay in this, but naively, I don't want to naively say that we would not be working to ensure that we have a plan for this building, and I think that we would do that in collaboration with city staff and city council.
Yeah, I appreciate all that, and I do understand the history of, and it was initiated by, quote, the other side or whatever. And again, there's no criticism in any of these things.
No.
It's just trying to get through. I guess the point I'm trying to make is, and I was, all honesty, I was on the K-Tech Foundation board for a minute and saw things from that perspective. But I guess, one way to look at this whole thing, and I'm trying to think too from the perspective of the community. This is a community asset, and one way to look at this, and this might be an unfortunate way to look at it, but it could be like an amicable divorce, right? Two groups have been joined together since 1969. Things aren't working, and one party says, "Hey, we need to do something different." And maybe that's the best result that comes out of this whole thing, and each group can focus on what they do best. But there's a part of me that wonders, besides the fact that we're going to be on the hook for essentially subsidizing this going forward, I just wonder if we could reverse the tape and get back, a year ago, say, or 9 months ago, and really sort of ask, why is this not working? What could we do to make it work better? You know, what might have happened if those conversations had taken place?
I think, and again, I don't like to
And the reason I ask that, again, for the future is if we weren't able to figure it out back then to really have a successful KTAC, then what's going to guarantee us going forward to really being able to have this be a success going forward? It sounds like the answer to that is you guys have got a strong plan, a strong team, you're committed to. Okay, yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you. Great questions.
You know, I come with this with a lot of different hats on, former school board member, someone who works in workforce readiness, and knowing that there's a lot of need for what you all are teaching in the schools, in that KTEC. I guess I just have a comment. One is that it sounds like if you all hadn't received, the city school board hadn't received the offer several months ago last year, then more than likely, like you said, you wouldn't be here today. But now that we received it and everything, we're going to make the best lemonade out of the lemons that you have, and I really like the direction that you're going in. That we're looking forward, thinking on how we can not only serve Charlottesville students but the county students as well. We want to just be fair and open to everyone, students, because the jobs and things that we're going to, future workers that we're going to be getting, is going to help the entire community, whether you work in the city, live or work in the county. So I really like the approach that the school system is taking. You know, this is going to be a benefit for everyone. And if I understood you correctly, that if everything kind of stays the same, that actually the cost for the county will lower than currently.
That's correct.
That's another situation. So we still can have that kind of collaborative spirit going forward. So I look forward to seeing whatever happens in the future with this. I feel good about the lead for both here, the city schools, here the city council, and chips with the county and community. And I know that you all are already reaching out to our existing partners that work with KTEC, but also forging new partnerships, which is this. And that's one of the things I always value about being Charlottesville School Board, is that we just didn't sit around. We always was looking for new partnerships. So thank you. Thank you.
I do want to go back to Mr. Pinkston in terms of you said about what would be different. I think what we know that is that Albemarle had a different plan for that building, and that plan did not consist of Charlottesville City Schools. In terms of, we weren't equal in plan, because they have plans that are specific for their students, and we need to be fact.
Can you be specific? I don't understand that. Tell me what.
Well, they were in the process of, they were plans for that building to have other uses than just technical education programming. And so we know that. And so now, different is, there's nothing that benefit both parties. They needed that building specifically for our students outside of the current programming. And so what's different now is that we're both in the same space to send students to KTEC for career and education programming. We're being transparent in we're not taking any other programs over there to be housed because we own that building. It's going to be vocational programming. And so that's what's different. So I just wanted to make sure that I say that, because I think that that's a lot of the driver behind this conversation.
Just to clarify that, are you saying that the plan that the folks were developing, the way they could do what they wanted to do was basically get Charlotte out? Or that they were planning to keep Charlotte there and also do other things that they wanted to be doing other than KTEC?
Right. So I definitely wouldn't say out. And again, I'm in conversations with Doc. I believe Albemarle had all intentions of considering Charlottesville students, but what they could not guarantee is that down the road the bell scale continue to line up. All of those other things. So it wasn't. It was going to. They wanted to put us out. No, I'm not implying that at all. Just that it would not always be a mutually beneficial space because they're growing and they have other needs for that building, and it's
Or some building.
that building.
Well,
That
obviously, if
building.
they're not going
Yeah.
to be there, they now have to take those space needs someplace else.
That's between the
Yeah.
school board and the superintendent.
I mean, I'll just tell you, I'm sure it's not you that our email channels have been burning up last week or so.
Primarily by the foundation board.
Others, yeah, not exclusively, but
My email.
actually, before I get to that, there are a couple other questions I had during your presentation. Do we have at this point, or is this one that's going to get worked on and is in process, a specific for how we're dealing with the county students for the next few years? Is that something that's still, or is it
You're talking about
kind of figured out?
The slide went through.
Yeah, looking at your page 7, I guess, and where
Which one is page 7?
why acquire K-Tech.
Okay.
And I'm aware somebody sent me a copy of the letter of 1st 2022 from the county schools to the city schools that included a number of fairly specific things about seeing a number of Charlottesville students to attend free of charge for 3 years, and so and then at beginning 4th year for the next 7 years, tuition at such and such. Do we have a similar sort of thought right now about what our proposed county would be once we take over for those counties to continue?
Yes, we do, and that's included. So we start to optimize that budget talked about, and I did not my slides, but where we start to talk about this the budget and the slots. Yes, we do, and we can provide that to them.
It's in the presentation.
Yeah.
It talks about the slots for tuition.
In current allocation of student slots at K-Tech, that's Dr. Gurley is referencing that particular, if I am not mistaken. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I'm looking. I guess I have two separate questions that I'm sort of smushing together, and I shouldn't. The first was whether there was a fully developed, or whether it's still yet to be developed, suggestion about how students from the county are going to be integrated. And I will tell you, at this point, I am asking a question that a number of folks have me, and all I can say is it's not my job. That's not my problem. But they
I
would
just want
like
to make sure that I'm hearing you, Mr. Snook. Are you saying after to still have questions about how students will be integrated?
One of the things that I'm hoping to do this evening is to some of the questions that have been given to people have been asking us
Sure.
to answer for
Yes.
obvious reasons, and to see if there is an answer.
Right.
And maybe there is, it just hasn't been disseminated.
Right.
Or maybe it's one of those things where that committee in August and we'll figure it out by then, or, I mean, which is an answer. I don't
Right.
think we have to have a fully hatched
Right. Well,
plan
the
right
question
now.
to how they will be integrated, I think we have been very clear that we are going to make any changes. They will still access K-Tech in the same manner. We just need to get for them that number, which is significantly lower than what they in tuition.
Okay, so I guess the other question that comes up, and it was on that certainly Vice Mayor Wade was pointing me to, was this question. Your quote here says, "For Albemarle students, the station will result in lower costs per slot than would have been incurred continuation of the partnership due to capital and overhead costs now fully by the city." I interpret as meaning that because we are going to have to bear, or choosing to bear in any event, 100% of utilities and maintenance and non-instructional personnel, they will be coming in at more of a marginal cost than an average cost. Is that fair to say?
I guess that's fair to say.
Why do we do that?
Well, we own the building.
Right.
We own the building, so and then the included tuition would not be the electric. It would be their access the instructional material.
I guess, I mean, my question is maybe more of one of a policy. Why do we want to adopt a situation where expecting anybody else to share in the average cost of operation?
Yeah, sure.
Good evening. Kim Powell, Chief Operations Officer. I think you all know me. So I speak to a couple of things. First, you need to know that the programming at K-Tech is self-sustaining. It's actually more than self-sustaining. So, Mr. Pinkston, when you were speaking to, all the costs that the city is on the hook for, and I wish we had the presentation back up on the screen, but the slide that shows the K-Tech budget projection, what you'll see there is that we're really focusing that just on the high school costs. Overheads, yes, as Dr. Gurley said, the idea was custodial costs, utilities costs, maintenance costs, and 100% of the CIP. Those are things that the city, those are expenses that you pay. They're kind of the price of ownership, if you will, if you look at it that way. Whereas the programming costs are more something that could be spread based on participation and, frankly, based on the programming decisions that are made down the road in conjunction with the city. But one of the things with the adult program, and this happens now to some extent, is the revenues that program brings in excess of the cost of providing those adult programs in the evening can go towards the CIP or the operational overheads. But in having this discussion, we're trying to keep the high school program discussion as clean as it can be. That bigger discussion about what happens with adult ed, what the opportunities are, that's a bigger discussion that I think is less about the transition and more about the task force that that Mayor Snook called for in the earlier discussions about this opportunity. So,
I guess thinking about the marginal cost, average cost problem, there are an awful lot of businesses that have gone bankrupt charging only marginal cost, like virtually all of them.
I think that one of the other really important features that we put into this plan is the concept of the rolling 3-year commitment both ways, because that does give the opportunity to reevaluate and adjust based on the needs of the learners and the needs to maintain K-Tech as it is now. I mean, I think it's not a question of how we make K-Tech successful. K-Tech is successful. It's a valuable resource, as we've said repeatedly. It's a question of what, under sole ownership, how do we move forward in a way that best serves the needs of the community, and that includes high school learners and adult learners. And it is absolutely vital for the businesses in this community that we be good stewards of this resource. The proposal that we are putting before you is really a way to try to assist with that smooth transition, and also, frankly, to just help people hopefully get out of their feelings and just stay the course, stay calm, and continue serving, not disrupt things for Albemarle students or certainly Charlottesville students, and then make decisions as we go, as we have a better idea for what their building plans are and what their programming needs are. But I think what Dr. Gurley's, made clear is that we understand that we are not going to dictate what Albemarle does or how they decide to participate or not participate in K-Tech. And the important thing to understand is there are options to pivot, still serve high school students to the extent that we need to, but then look more at what the broader city needs are with this resource. And so, again, it's just really the concept of marginal versus the term you're using is one I'm not as familiar with, but this is more about what are the overheads or the fixed costs that you're going to incur no matter more or less what's going on in that building. And with ownership, we felt like, okay, we can take the responsibility of those costs. And then there are the direct programming costs, which we really need to be very wise and intentional about how those are allocated.
Mr. Mayor, is your point, do you think that these indirect costs of utilities should be rolled into the tuition?
Well, unless a conscious decision is being made that it's basically a loss leader, that we will sustain a loss here in order to keep the county happy, I think we need to acknowledge that that's what's happening, because any time you've got a business enterprise that isn't covering its average costs, I mean, that extra money's got to come from someplace, and it's apparently going to have to come from the school division. And maybe you all are okay with that. And the next question is it expected to come from the city and some additional appropriation to the school division to be able to make up those fixed costs that aren't being disseminated or aren't being spread among all participants?
So the $720,000 at the bottom there, that's in line with, in one of our, 2-on-2 meetings leading up to the decision points, Dr. Gurley threw out a number, I swear, I think it was $800,000, and I was actually shocked when we ran the numbers with pluses and minuses with the proposed administration reorganization type things that we landed at 720. It wasn't intentional, but it was interesting that your estimate was pretty good. That $720,000 does represent something that could be considered the incremental ask of the city to support additional overheads of owning K-Tech. That is an answer to one of the questions that's been floating around out there and something that was discussed before the decision or recommendation to purchase.
And will increase in future years, it sounds like, or it has the possibility of.
Certainly.
If the county pulls out.
The overhead piece actually is not the piece. That 720, that is something that it could decrease if you decide to roll more of those overheads. Let's say you decided that utilities are something you wanted to roll in. Those are decisions.
But it's not us. It's going to be you all.
Right. Well, I hope that it's a joint effort with the city to determine how you all want to prioritize the use of the resource. But the intention is no one should be flying blind here. The cost of ownership with this tuition proposal, that's the initial proposal, based on the rolling 3 years, would arrive at a bottom line like that. And so, because up in the $2.5 million, that cost is borne out depending on who's participating. So right now, if you look in one of the earlier slides, we pay $600 and some thousand a year to K-Tech for the portion of the costs that are allocated to us. That piece of it would go on going up or down, just as always, if the partnership continued. It's that overhead piece, to your point, that could be something that is discussed in conjunction with the city. I mean, the schools have no taxing authority, so this is a conversation about resource allocation and the will of the community.
And the projected overheads could also be dictated going up or down, but probably down, because we're looking not only at the educational piece of the high school, because that's what we're looking at now. That is the first and foremost consideration. It is not excluding the adult education program, which is currently in existence. It is not including the additional offerings for workforce development. There is a building there that can be utilized to do other things. We have the English, the math, the history. We have the HVAC program. We have the cosmetology program. We have the automotive program and bricklaying. Well, we may decide that there's something else we can do as it relates to workforce development that we hear from our community. I'm very happy that the young man that works on my car is a K-Tech graduate, okay? But that being said, we need to look at this as a value added.
I agree with you, Counselor, except I really feel like the CTE piece, and that's not your normal bread and butter, and I appreciate that. But to the community, the CTE piece is larger. I
The
think.
adult ed.
And your presentation hasn't focused on that, which I get. You're right. The main thing needs to be the students, but it's why the foundation board, for example, is really worried about this, and it's coming from a place of worry. Not
So it's a
from-
worry. So I think the
The
part
worry,
that-
I think, is
The worry.
A, how is this going to be funded going forward? But that's even secondary to what is our vision for CTE in this community, setting aside, who's in this county, who's in the city, and I realize that the jurisdictions or the overlap of the two school boards, that's critical for the student side of things. But looking at what K-Tech delivers for the whole community, it's more than that. And so I think that the anxiety you're hearing from a lot of people, for example, on the foundation board is how if the partnership before the split up happened wasn't working, apparently, at least not from the county's perspective. How do we know that what we're doing going forward is going to work? And
I think that I can't reiterate enough that I think that going forward is there's only one agenda.
okay.
I think there's only one agenda. I mean, I'm standing before you all as transparent as we can be, and I don't think that we've had that. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and I will say that publicly that I'm wrong. But I think prior to, there were no conversations about protecting Charlottesville City Schools students. And I am their champion. And that's what I stand before you today saying, is that I put our students first.
And I appreciate that,
Yes.
but we also need to champion the CTE program.
I think we're saying this. I think we're saying the same. I think we're saying the same thing because CTE is what takes place at high schools.
Okay.
There's vocational and CTE programming that happens at Charlottesville Albemarle Technical Education Center. Yes, but we're going to continue to make sure that all of those things happen. That's why we put in there a 3-year rolling slot agreement. So if Albemarle wakes up one day and they don't want to do that, then we have to have a conversation about what happens next. I'm also reaffirming that we don't wait until the day when someone says that they don't want to be in this relationship anymore, that we make plans for what happens next.
And CTE is going to be there. We have CTE personnel at all 4 of the high schools that participate. We have a CTE person currently at K-Tech. So,
But are they for like 20, like if I wanted to go back and learn how to be an auto mechanic,
Yep.
would the person that you're referring to who's in the high school
Yep.
help me become an auto mechanic?
No, the
you-
person is at the person. is
the
at
person,
K-Tech.
you would go to K-Tech as
You
an
go to
adult.
K-Tech.
Right. I guess
Yeah.
my point is
As a
it,
student, not,
I mean,
sorry. As a student, you go to
He-
K-Tech.
Yes, but he would go to K-Tech to meet with that CTE individual and not go to Charlottesville High School and meet with them, Brian Pinkston. Now, if Brian Pinkston was the high school student, he would meet with that person.
so I guess my question is, I'm really focused on the adult side.
Okay.
Is the point
Yes.
I'm trying to make.
Yes.
It's the adult component of this that, and I'm glad to hear that you're thinking about those things. It sounds like it's going to help subsidize
Right,
this.
more than thinking about it.
Okay.
I need to tell you that when I drive by K-Tech in the evenings, I know so many of the families and the individuals who own the businesses that have the trucks in that parking lot. I don't live in the city or Albemarle County. I live in another county, and our residents depend very much on being able to access the adult programs at K-Tech. And the good news is there's nothing broken about the adult programs at K-Tech. Those staff, and I don't want to say this holistically, maybe there's a few exceptions where some of our high school instructors also teach in the evening, but for the most part, they're different instructors that teach at night. It is more than self-sustaining, and I think a lot of our philosophy right now needs to be, if it's not broken, don't try to fix it. We need
Okay.
to maintain it and nurture it, and if anything, grow it, because I know, and you all know, when you look at businesses or you talk to business owners, they're looking for employees,
Yeah.
and you don't take that lightly as
Yeah.
members of this community at large, as
Okay.
this area. So I think The high school piece is actually the complicated piece.
Okay.
The adult piece, there's a lot of opportunity there, I think, is one of the encapsulating messages that you need to hear.
Okay.
And I just, most of my questions have been addressed, but just a couple, bigger picture ones. And I know it's a very fast-moving, fluid situation, so if, there's not clarity or you're unable to answer, definitely, feel free to let me know. But I had seen yesterday there was an Albemarle School Board member who released a public statement saying they expect Albemarle to go forward with building I think they called it a Center 2, and then take their students out of K-Tech. Is there clarity on whether that is Albemarle's plan from there, or is that locked in, or?
I have not received anything official with regards to that. No.
Okay. And if they were to move forward and do that, just assuming it did, I assume it would be similar to this additional $700,000 in operating costs. You would work with the city council to cover that over $2.5 million, I think, additional annual operating cost. It would be the plan. And then the final question is, if Albemarle did pull out and built a center in a couple years, for your average, 77% of students were Albemarle at K-Tech currently. What is the vision for how we move forward at that point, which I know presents opportunities, but I'm unsure if that were the case, kind of what the vision and long-term goal would be at that point.
No, I think that's a great question, and I think we have to keep that in our purview. I think what happens next is what we've already done. We've already started to assimilate thought partners, community members who are doing this work so that we can figure out what's the best use of that facility moving forward. There is a lot of life in K-Tech. It can continue to serve our students, and it can serve a whole lot of other people. I think at the end of the day, respectfully, I don't control what happens in Albemarle. We tried that already and it didn't work. Yeah, I think we have to develop a plan, and I think we are doing that on our end, and I think very transparently it requires us to work in collaboration with our city partners. We do need you all's assistance. We do need the very smart brains of the people who work on city staff to sit around the same table. I feel like I've said operationalize a lot the last couple of days. But we do. We have a lot of plans that we can make work. But we can't do all of those things on our end, sitting in a silo. And I know you all can't do that sitting in a silo. We have to be regularly at the table together so that whenever Albemarle chooses to do whatever they're going to do, that we're prepared to do what's next for our students and our community.
I'm sorry, just to, so if we look at a scenario down the road that 400 students, 300 of them, are no longer there, they're at the county, they have started their own center, that is what you're saying, that we as a community can sit around and decide what we want to do with that space, in addition to career technical education,
yes,
what to do with that space. I would venture to say that we would be able to even offer wider options for our students without, to Charlottesville students. It's so close to Charlottesville High School, I think it would even open up more options. But I understand what you're saying. We need to work with what we know at this point, and so if I'm not on school board anymore, but I would just be in the mindset of what you're doing. You need to plan and act accordingly, but just continue to be open to dialogue and conversations.
One thing I just want to note that the longest, most impassioned conversations I've had over the last few days have actually been with county residents. and not just, I mean, folks who are involved in the issue, and they seem to be saying, can't you all at the city level make something different happen in your relationship with the county so that this apparently poisonous relationship as it exists now can somehow be papered over or something to keep this, to keep the divorce from happening. So I just thought it was interesting that the people who were spending the most time trying to talk to me about it were county folks.
Right.
And I'm not quite sure what that means. I'm not sure whether it matters whether I know what it means, because it's clearly a political problem that they've got to deal with. But it does suggest that, one of the things it suggests to me is that perhaps our friends in the county don't yet have a plan for what will come next for them. And so if there's some notion that they've already decided on setting up this Center 2 or something, that
I think they're working towards a plan.
Yeah.
That's what I've heard.
It may all be premature. The overall point that I wanted to make, and I will tell you that, and I think I've mentioned it to you and to the school folks here, and I'll just describe it sort of publicly. When it became apparent that the county had finally sent us this offer that triggered the process that we had to respond to, and they were offering an amount of money, $5.3 million, it was essentially less, it was $1.2 million less than what we thought the fair value of it ought to be, so that if we had the opportunity to buy it for 5.3, that would be a good deal for us. Because in part we would not be able to duplicate the services and the facilities someplace else for $5.3 million. And so that led me to believe, basically, that this is a situation where it's clear what path we have to go down. And I said then that I thought that we should go ahead and tell you all, go ahead and buy the property, put in the counteroffer. But that in order to make that happen, knowing that the number of students of Charlottesville High School students who are going to this to K-Tech right now would not replace everybody who might arguably be leaving from Albemarle County, that we needed to think about it more. Not just in terms of what some guidance counselor at CHS may be advising kids to do, but what we as a community need to do. And that led me to think about the problem of workforce development. That led me to think about ultimately the sort of the goal that I'm trying to articulate here is that any kid who goes through 12 years of Charlottesville schools should come out with either a path to college or a trade. Mm-hmm. And that means that we need to up our game aside from what the schools are doing. But the point that I guess I want to make right now is that as we sort of think about it, this will tie into something else we're going to talk about later on tonight in a different context. I want to keep, at least as much as we can analytically, the two pieces separate so that we can know what's working and what's not. Because if we aggregate all the data and we don't know where, we just don't know what's working. And so that's the reason I had suggested what some folks have called the task force, but the general idea would be get folks from the schools, folks from our workforce development people from BBCC. UVA told us recently that they've got a shortage of 2,500 workers, and we're not talking professors, we're talking about entry-level people and every other kind of thing, kind of job. And organizations like Abundant Life Ministries that wants to really get involved with getting kids into trades, and there are probably other entities out there as well, and really figure out what a community-wide solution would look like. Because there's, anyway, just if I'm the only person espousing the goal, that doesn't get us anywhere.
No, I completely agree with you.
And we need to have the
that's-
community approach.
And I think if that were something that, and I realize you are you are responding, like the Vice Mayor said here, with lemons and lemonade, and I appreciate that. Y'all are doing fine, great job. But I think being able to articulate the overall vision of students who come in and adults who come in, and how they go into that mixture that is K-Tech, and we add that with some help with PVCC or from other resources, and help our local work economy have the people they need to do the jobs, and to invest in the skills so that we're helping folks build good lives.
And I
We've
think
already
that's
started
something
that.
that can be discussed and addressed and hashed out in one of the work groups that Dr. Gurley has already formulated, and I feel that he will be happy in his work groups to deal with the adult portion of CTE and any questions from that, and if we need him to come back to specifically talk about that portion of the Charlottesville Area Technical Education Center, I feel we can make arrangements to have that placed on our agenda. But that is a topic based on your concerns, the foundation's concerns, that can be addressed in the work groups.
And I note that this letter we got from Linda Seaman and the K-Tech board, the foundation board, lists a number of questions, most of which strike me as great questions for us to be working on over the next year, but not questions that we can reasonably expect anybody
Correct.
to have an answer for right now.
Correct.
That's
So-
correct.
No, and I think just final thought, I mean, at least in terms of our thinking on it, for us on City Council, I think we need to assume it's at least if not likely, certainly possible outcome that in a 5 to 10 year time horizon, Albemarle will not be utilizing that building anymore. And so how do we think in terms of our 5-year CIP, our strategic planning, what that means for us? That's kind of where I'm coming from.
So you telling Sam to put something else on that strategic plan list? No, I'm just.
We're moving our strategic, we're moving our retreat, Mr. Samuels, to a more commodious environment so that we can work an extra day to get everything in.
Other questions or comments for Dr. Gurley?
Thank you, Dr. Gurley.
I just want to say
and
that
staff.
I appreciate you. I want to say this on behalf of the staff because they work tirelessly. We do appreciate you. We have been moving very quickly because the timeline has been ticking with regards to this matter. We recognize that there's still a lot of work that needs to happen moving forward, but we really need city staff at the table with us because this cannot be something that we do in a silo.
And I think I would be remiss if I didn't note a couple of other folks who are here. Obviously, we have some school board members here. We also have somebody that some of you may not know, Grant Tate. Grant sent to me, and I sent on to the rest of council, a report that, Grant, you had done, 9 years ago, I think it was? 2013. Yeah.
Almost 10.
Yeah. With a lot of forward-thinking ideas about this field, and I would suggest all of us go back and reread it because I found it to be interesting reading.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Do we have 300?
Come up to a microphone so that in case anybody is actually watching this online, they can get the benefit of it.
So I would say, do we have 300 students in Charlottesville schools who could use something like K-Tech? And so I would say we should make plans that it's a Charlottesville facility within, I was going to say 5 years, maybe it's 3. But that should be the vision for the school. And if Albemarle or anybody else wants seats, then they have to bid for them. But I think that we should look at this as an opportunity to serve the students in Charlottesville, because heavens knows we need it. The other thing I would say is that what should be in that building? If we look at the whole range of CTE programs in the city, then there's some things that can be done in the high school. You have a computer and a high-speed line, you can do it. What should be in the K-Tech-like building? Laboratories. Where do you need some physical facilities that you would not put in a high school building typically? The old days we used to do that. All these jobs are going to change. Let's take auto mechanics. A Tesla is a computer on wheels. Mm-hmm. And anybody who works on a Tesla needs to know how that technology integrates with the physical part of it. That's going to happen to all of our fields. And so I think that how we plan in the future is going to be absolutely critical. There are some people who are saying that 80% of our jobs are going to be different in 5 years. I don't know if the number's 5, but I can tell you that that's the perspective we need to have. We've got, I think, at least 74 businesses in Charlottesville area that are in the biotechnology field. Walk through one of those laboratories and look at the skills required. They have to learn they have to know the instrumentation, they have to know how to use the pieces of technology. All of those are basic skills that our children need to learn to really grow and learn in this community. So I think we need a vision of what we want in the future as a community and as a city, and let's plan the education system and support it to get there. Thanks.
Thank you, Grant. And while we're sort of going around, Richard, anything? Well, you're a participant to a certain extent. And I thought if you had anything, Richard Brewer is a member of the K-Tech Foundation Board. Mm-hmm. Richard, if there's anything you wanted to add to this discussion.
I guess I would. So many things will change, but many things will also stay the same. And I joined the K-Tech board just in time for COVID, I think.
Mm-hmm. You did.
But anyway, I got to know it, and it's a wonderful school. It's a wonderful resource. And what I noticed is there are 400 students, but it's got a capacity for 600. Mm-hmm. So my years on the board were all focused on driving up the number of people attending, which was obviously impacted by COVID. But you got 600 during the day, you could have 600 at night, you could have 1,200 during the summer. The new jobs sound great, but everyone here is getting older. There probably is a caregiver shortage in Charlottesville, I would guess, of 1,000 caregivers, maybe 2,000. So much needs to be done to drive the numbers way up from where they are today. So I would plan on a significant investment in K-Tech. I would add a business outreach person to go out to businesses who will help fund some of these programs, but it's not stay the same. Much needs to be invested. So, thank you all.
Thank you.
Good presentation.
Thank you.
Are you raising your hand there, Mr. Chair?
May I speak for a moment?
Please, yes. We have about 7 minutes until we're sort of supposed to be doing something else, so you got a few minutes.
I just want to first say on behalf of the Charlottesville City School Board, we have several members here present. We would like to thank the City Council and Mr. Rogers for moving this initiative forward. I have a long association with K-Tech, starting 20 years ago when I was hired as a school counselor at Albemarle High School. So I have a long association. I want to cite 2 life experiences that I had as a school counselor in dealing with students in K-Tech. I've always been a strong advocate of K-Tech. always believed as a counselor that students should have options. Everybody is not designed to go to college. But this first incident was a student at Albemarle High School 20 years ago. He came into my office and he said, "Mr. Bryant, I do not want to go to college." Of course, I kind of paused a little bit. And he said, "I am going to attend technical school because I love working on BMW cars." He did attend technical school in Pennsylvania. He came back to Charlottesville, got hired at the BMW dealership, did extremely well, and they sent him to Florida for additional training. And in my last contact with him several years ago, he's doing quite well. That was in Albemarle County. While I was a counselor at Charlottesville High School, I decided to convert my home from baseboard heating to central air. So the day they came to hook up my unit, a young man came up in the yard, didn't know who he was, and he said, "I'm the electrician, and I'm here to hook up your wiring." He was very young. I was a little nervous at first because the wiring had to go upside of my house into the attic. And that young man was a Charlottesville High School. He's a Charlottesville High School graduate and also a graduate of that K-Tech program. To this day, since 2007, I have not had any problems with that electrical wiring. To say all of that, we have to provide options for our young people. And we are more than gracious that you all are looking to move this initiative forward. Dr. Gurley and his team has done an outstanding job of keeping us abreast on the progress of those committees and what they're doing. We are excited. Albemarle County and Charlottesville City have always worked hand in hand, and we will continue to. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant.
Thank you.
So, anything else from anybody? Well, then it's 5:26. It's about the 5:30 end point that we had set. We will we need to have a motion to go into closed session. Mr. Pinkston, you got the motion handy?
Yes. Motion for City Council closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3712 of the Virginia Code. I hereby move that City Council close this open meeting and convene in a closed session as authorized by Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A7 to have consultation with legal counsel pertaining to actual litigation scheduled for trial in Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A8 to receive advice of legal counsel related to recent court decisions.
Is there a second? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We will now go into closed session. We'll return to a separate Zoom link for the open meeting, and we'll see you all roughly 6:30. Thank you.